Welcome to Oneness and Wellness. We're here today with Marsha Reddington Lawton, Lorraine Goldblum, and we're talking about money, the issue of money. I'm sure you'll be interested. So
Everyone's interested in money issues because everyone has money issues.
That's right. Or wants money.
Or whatever that issue is. But you know, when I was putting together the issue series, and this is what we're doing. I wanted to create something where, because I teach something called vortex healing, and I often talk about it and demonstrate it. But I find that the way that people really relate to it is how it can help them with their issues, and talking about the nature of issues and how they show up in our lives, our relationships, our personalities, our bodies, and our whole energy system. You know, I talk about the chakras and the pathways and all of that. But really, the thing that makes an issue interesting is the way that it creates identity. All right, and Money is one of those issues. When I was sort of making my list of issues, I was trying to think of things that everyone has in some form or another. And whatever it is, however it looks like, everyone seems to have an issue about money, whether you have it or you don't. And it's one of those issues that creates a very strong identity. Like you've heard me talk about, issues are not just, oh, I'm experiencing anger in my system. We identify it and experience as part of ourself. I am angry. Well, money, as I sort of sat down to look at it, money is kind of our exchange with the world. You know, money is how we kind of go about and interact with the world on a certain level. So in order to do that, a very natural thing to do is create an identity that goes with it. How am I in the world to create this exchange? I'm rich, I'm poor, I'm struggling, I'm the provider, I'm the, you know, all of the, you know, it's a very loaded issue. I noticed that workshops about abundance are always successful. You want people to attend your workshop, do it in abundance, you know, and not just financial abundance. You know, there are many levels of abundance. And I don't mean to make light of that. But I find that, you know, financially, you know, people, you know, there's such a sense of lack, you know, in terms of that. And the interesting thing about a money issue is you can look at 100 different people, and the issue will show up and look in 100 different ways, you know. For example, when I was, you know, young and I had, you know, no money and I was living very hand to mouth, money was a survival issue. I didn't have any. I wasn't entirely sure. I was never out on the street, but I wasn't sure where my next meal would come from. You know, there were some shaky days. So money is a survival issue.
Worldwide.
Yes. But in my own personal experience, then I got older, and then suddenly you have kids. I wasn't worried about where my next meal was coming from, but then there's a whole different level of money issue. And I realized I never had money issues until you were worrying about how to pay for that school, or it looked completely differently, but it was still an issue about money. So it's fascinating. If you want to know about a person, track how they spend their money in a particular way. What are their priorities, and how? It's not good or bad. It's not a judgment. It's just a lot of information. You know, where do you spend your money on self-care? Do you spend your money? Do you do charities? Do you know, where are the priorities? Do you donate to the school that gave you so much, you know, as a student? You know, it's really very telling. We bring that exchange back to what we care about in a particular way. So I found it fascinating to sort of take a look at this issue and how it shows up for different people, and for different people at different phases of their lives. Does that make sense?
It certainly does.
Could you give us some more examples of the different stages and how it shows up?
Well, I think a general thing is, very often, if someone is younger, they're in their 20s and they don't have a lot of money, that's not judged so much by society. Oh, you're young, you're getting it together. You know, for me, it was even kind of romantic because I was an actress, and there was an identity in the starving young actress thing.
Right.
Okay, you know, this is fine. When you're 30s, it's not so cute. In the 30s, the novelty starts to wear off. In the 30s, there's an expectation that you kind of have to have a little stability in your life. Maybe you're looking for a partner if you don't have one, and you want to be able to bring something to the table. You're thinking about having children if you don't have money. You know, in your 40s, then there's a sense of, you really need a sense of stability, and maybe you have a family to provide for. And I was talking about, you know, money issues look in a different way, and that provider identity and that kind of thing. You know, money is stressful in a very different way than it was in your 20s. You know, in your 50s, 60s, you're starting to think about what your life is going to look like when you stop working. And will your money outlive you? And that position and what that looks like. So at every stage of life, it's something we need to look at. And we also think of money issues as people who don't have money have issues. But I've also witnessed, you know, people who do have money, you know, they carry a different kind of burden. You know, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with money. People judge other people who have money. You know, people I've known who come from wealthy families or have trust funds don't tend to put that out because of the judgment, the unfair judgment that they receive from people that, oh, you're so lucky, you don't have any problems, what you do. Well, that's completely unfair, and therefore they need to sort of hide, you know, or, you know, what they have. So it's very often an issue in many different ways.
Mm-hmm. It's not my issue.
Good for you. Good for you. That's great.
All my life, I've said, because of my belief in a God, spiritual connection, I've always said, I've always been taken care of. You know, I've always had enough, not too much, but I've always had enough that I've never had to worry. So I've never worried about money. And it's just, you know, it's I just say thank you, and you know, I'm being washed over. My husband tells me, you're foolish, don't you understand? I said, I understand perfectly well. I'm coming to the end of my life, you know, and I'm not going to change now. It's just always blessed me. And so that's been my way of living.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So what about, you know, the person who believes, say you lost it all tomorrow, you know, which will not happen, lost all your money tomorrow. And would that mean suddenly...
I don't have any money. My husband has money.
Okay.
I don't. You know, he won't lose it because he watches out for it. But
right.
I really have no money.
But I guess what I'm pointing to
I have my Social Security.
is, say that abundance. If for some reason, and I'm not suggesting this is your issue, I'm saying this is where a lot of us might go. If you lost that abundance tomorrow, you know, if he lost his money, you know, theoretically, through no fault of his own, would that mean that God doesn't love you?
No.
But see, a lot of people think that it might.
It's a punishment.
It could be viewed that way, and that's another way that issue shows up, that God rewards. If I'm doing the work that I'm meant to do, then I'm going to get paid for it, and money becomes a way that we judge ourselves.
As far as worthiness or
as far as worthiness and the issue of shame that we're talking about, I find it shows up a lot in that way. And that can be very hard because it can point to deeper issues of trust in the divine. I mean, it's wonderful that you're someone who has that kind of trust in the divine. Not everyone does. And money can be an indication of that. Tracking that issue can be very, very telling. Very telling. Am I really on my life's purpose? Well, how can I be if I'm not earning a living doing it, or not earning it? Then the divine is telling me, oh, then this isn't right. You know, we do a lot of that. And it also, when I'm talking about money in terms of identity, it keeps us in certain social circles, doesn't it? Because people who have the same amount of money like to hang out together. Not exclusively, But it's been an observation, which is a generalization, of course. But, you know, people are more comfortable in their same, you know, when I was living hand to mouth and I had some friends who had more money, well, they would want to go to the nicer restaurant. And I said, you really not do that. And they said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. Like, I really appreciate that, but I'd rather go to the cheap place and, you know.
Pay for myself.
And pay for myself, which was not their issue. It was mine. But, you know, it sort of works on all levels. It's just very interesting to observe.
My issue of money is not, you know, the having it or whatever, but I had a very wealthy friend who is now passed. But I think I judged her, you know, that she had the money and, you know, and it didn't put us together, you know, as much as it pulled us apart.
Judgment does that.
It was a judgment, you know, and I really had to overcome that, you know, and say that, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, whether it's rich or poor or we're all one.
Absolutely.
You know, we're one people, one family, and not to have judgment for her.
Yeah. How wonderful that you can recognize that, you know, because that's exactly the kind of thing I was talking about. When I was first married, my husband made a lot more money than I did. And he was fine. He didn't have money issues. I had money issues. I was feeling insecure about what I was bringing into the relationship, and am I really an equal partner? Because for some people, money is power. Not my beautiful husband. For some people it is, and I was feeling like, oh, maybe I'm not an equal partner in this way, and I would, you know, want to be sure to give him money towards rent, which was silly, because he was like, we're good. I can support you. This is love. This is great. He had no issue with it. It was me. It was that kind of insecurity, a kind of shame. We talked about shame, where I felt this need to no. I need to be equal. Let me give you this kind of thing, and it was a way that I was trying to compensate for something that I was feeling. It was a money issue, you know, trying to. You know, well, it was an issue about shame masquerading as a money issue. But that's where it was showing up. It took me a long time to relax and be like, okay, it doesn't have to be that way. And it doesn't have to be something that separates us. Because any kind of issue like that separates us from each other.
So I hear you talking about, if I hear you correctly, that money really represents many, many, many different issues.
Absolutely.
As far as judgment, as far as worthiness, as far as the capacity to have certain relationships or not.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I'm saying it looks different in different people. For some people, money...
In cultures.
And cultures, of course, absolutely. For some people, money is about power. You know, when you're standing in the world, if you don't have a certain amount of money, then you don't have a strong enough standing in the world. For some people, you know, it's sort of an interpersonal exchange, you know, how we support each other or demonstrate lack of support or something like that. For some of us, as I said, it's a survival issue. For most of us, it's a combination of things, and it's not so cut and dry, which is it's hard to, you know, go through and realize what we're dealing with here when we come into our money issues.
So that was my friend. Hers was power.
Yeah.
She had power. She had a lot of other issues, but she liked that power that money gave her.
Yeah.
You know,
sure.
Which it does.
Yeah, it does. In a sense, it does. And if you look, you know, often, you know, the person who makes more money has more power in a relationship. Not always. That's another generalization. I wouldn't say that across the board. But it's something that's viewed, you know. And of course, all relationships are exchanges on certain levels.
Right. So hold that thought. We're going to be right back. We'll take a short break. Thank you for watching. Keep watching. This is really interesting. Money.
Hello, I'm Lorraine Goldblum, and I'd like to invite you to the Issues series. And it's a way that we're exploring how issues keep us separate from each other and the world around us, and how we come out of that into freedom. I hope you'll join us.
Welcome back to Oneness and Wellness. We're talking with Masha and Lorraine, and our guest, about the issue of money. So, Lorraine, what is the money issue?
What is the money issue? What isn't the money issue? No, we were having a really lovely discussion off camera, I think the best things arise when you're feeling comfortable and you really just sit down and brainstorm. And someone just posed the question, well, what is money? What are we really talking about here? Because the point of sort of going through in this series is to look at different ways that people have issues. So we're not really talking about money as a currency, although that's how money shows up. We're really talking about money as exchange. And whenever you have interpersonal exchange, you have issues. It's just it's where our issues show up, don't they? So that is why money, shows up in so many different ways. We think of money as the bill, or the Bitcoin, or even the service that goes back and forth. But what we're really talking about today, my point of interest, is what comes up in that exchange. What is that power issue? What is that insecurity issue? What is that identity as someone who has money, or someone who doesn't have money, or someone who should be earning more money, or someone who uses that money as a definition of how successful they are? That's really what we're exploring. You were talking about an example during break of someone who had money where it seemed to create a buffer, was the word that you used. I think that's beautifully said. Do you want to?
Well, I think we're all vulnerable, whatever role in life we're in.
Yeah.
And so between the haves and the have-nots, having an abundance,
Yeah.
in a world where there's many who have judgment about not having abundance, creates all sorts of tensions, issues, expectations. How do you have appropriate boundaries?
Right.
And once again, you take the money away, the issues still remain the same.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I think that no matter what position you're in, one can be truly challenged not only by whatever their own belief system is about worth and things, but you have to deal with everybody else's as well. And how do you find that sense? I mean, how do you make sense out of that in the world? Because it's such a loaded issue.
It's such a loaded issue, and because it looks different, it looks very differently in different people. I don't know how you make sense of that. I think you just do the same you do with other issues, is that you bring awareness to it and unconditional love, and whatever therapy you're using and your vortex healing, and you just see it for what it is. How does it show up in my life? Where and how does it keep me separate from the world around me? I mean, ideally, money can be a tool. It can be a tool to connecting to the world. It can be a tool to help create, to bring a vision to life. It could be a tool to support. It can be, and there's nothing, an exchange is a beautiful thing if it's not loaded down by our issues. So I think our, I don't want to use the word responsibility, but, my curiosity really is what happens in that exchange. Where are the points where I get separated? Where are the moments that I get isolated? That story I told with my husband, in that exchange, I was in a separate place from him. And can you look at that, and can you break that down? Do you have a willingness to let that go? Someone brought up during the break, which I think is absolutely brilliant, is this idea, one of the stumbling blocks, I think, to all of our issues, including money, is this idea of this idea of conditional love. And I think looking at money issues, very often we feel like we need to be a certain someone, we need to earn enough, that our value is conditional on what we can provide. Our worth, a father's worth, is a provider and what he can provide to the family. And not that that isn't welcome and important, but it's also, of course, limiting and keeps that separation going on, and that identity becomes a problem very often. So it's absolutely, fascinating to look at this stuff.
And I think culturally, we're dealing a little bit with it. You know, I think about the stay-at-home dad who, you know, takes care of the children in the home and everything, and the partner goes off to the workplace. You know, that never happened years ago. So that's a little bit of that, you know, looking at it a little bit differently. You know, how they work it out, you know, together so that there isn't, you know, and they have to have X amount of money to provide for their...
And some people embrace that beautifully, the man who's willing to stay at home, it doesn't bother him, the woman that's willing to go. And then many people have difficulty with it because it's not what is expected or what they're used to, and they're afraid they're going to be judged, or it's, you know, by the colleagues in the office, or you're staying home or whatever. You know, this kind of fear, isolation, and shame. You know, this is why I started with the shame, because we keep coming back to the idea, am I okay with this? And money is a great way to try to prove to ourselves in the world that we are okay. See, I must be okay. I have a lot of money. I'm generating money. I got this. You know, I must be okay on some level.
It keeps coming up to me, and it's probably nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I see giving and receiving as the same. You know, it's the same, you know, pathway. But it took me a long time to see. I thought the giving was the best, you know, I valued it. It was valued more than the receiving. But it's both ways, the giving and receiving. They're equal.
Well, in a way, for someone like myself, just the nature of my issue and how I hold my stuff together, giving is safer.
Amen. Yes.
It's much safer to be a giver. I'm a giver. I'm a giver. I'm a giver. Because in order to receive, you have to admit that you're vulnerable and that you need. You know, there's a courage to the willingness to allow yourself to be helped, that you have something to learn, that you actually need support. It requires much more vulnerability to receive in that way, and that can be much harder for a lot of people. So if you have a real, genuine exchange, that's going on all the time. You know, people have their strengths and their weaknesses and all of that. But, you know, someone made a brilliant point during the talk, is that I think a key to abundance is the willingness to receive. Right? That, you know, you have to be relaxed and feel, you know, safe enough in everything that you just said, to be open enough to acknowledge that you can and that you need to, and be willing to do that, and to have that kind of courage opens the door to gratitude, you know, and gratitude, I think, is the key, you know, for many of us to recognize, you know, what we have is an important step to how we move forward. If we don't acknowledge what we have in our lives, you know, we can't be grateful for it, and how can we have happiness? Because then we're just coming from a place of lack all the time.
That's right.
Also, gratefulness, but also valuing. Because if we're in a place where somebody is offering and they're not being received, there's a judgment there.
Absolutely.
And one of the incredibly sacred parts of being willing to receive is being in that moment where you're valuing that connection, where you're honoring what's being offered. When you're at least honoring the fact that somebody wants to connect with you. You know, that's so powerful. That's so sacred.
It's sacred. You know, all of this is the background for your subject, the issue of money. This is all background, and we're going to do a whole other program on the issue of money.
It's good stuff, right?
It's good stuff. And keep watching us. We'll be right back. Well, you keep watching. It'll be next week that you'll see it again, but we'll be with you. Namaste.